All right, guys, let's talk about something that's probably going to piss a lot of you guys off and be a little controversial to say out loud on the internet, but your SBRs are pretty gay. 16-inch guns are really based, actually. So let's talk about it. Obviously, I got a bunch of SBRs behind me, so I love SBRs, but I was thinking about it the other day, and I was out at XMTG training with James Ferguson up there. We'll have a video coming out soon about that, about a scope carbine course. We've done a GPR video with them in the past, but we were talking about how the vast majority of Americans own 16-inch rifles. It has been whether that's because the NFA or not, whether I don't really know. NFA, of course, regulates SBRs as any barrel length shorter than 16 inches. So maybe that's the reason there's so many 16-inch guns out there. But 16-inch guns get a bad rap. They're not sexy. They're not cool. You know, if you want a precision rifle or a SPR setup, you usually go for an 18-inch barrel. If you want a long boy, you know, Vietnam clone, you go for a 20-inch barrel. And if you want a bedside cool guy gun like high-speed CQB, you're usually going like a 10.3. Now it's 11.5 or 12.5 or 13.7 pin and weld or 14.5. And those kind of fall into the category of the 16-inch as well. But I want to just key in on the 16-inch rifle because, like I said, the vast majority of Americans have some version of a 16-inch rifle, whether that be a Palmetto State or a Poverty Pony or a Springfield or a Smith & Wesson or whatever it is. They went down to their local gun shop or their academy or Bass Pro, whatever, and just bought a 16-inch rifle off the shelf because that's what most normal gun people who aren't like into guns like we would be per se, or if you're watching this video, you're probably more so into guns than like an enthusiast or like an average person walking into a Bass Pro Shops to buy an AR. That's what they're probably going to buy. They're not probably going to go through the knowledge that it would take for them to learn about the rules surrounding the NFA. They're not going to register for an SBR. The pistol bracing made it, a lot more achievable for people to get short barreled guns and rifles, but without having to register them, so on and so forth. And now they're back on the menu, but we're going down a huge rabbit hole. So let's just talk about why 16-inch guns are really based. And before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you for stopping by the video. There's 3 ways you can support the channel. Liking, commenting, subscribing is a huge help, guys. So every single comment, even if it's just something stupid or you're making fun of me, I still appreciate that. And then Brownells bro code RDB10 saves you guys 10% off at Brownells. And then bro code RDB5 saves you 5% off at Downrange Thermal, who's our newest thermal sponsor of the channel. They also sell a lot of EOTech products. This scope, this Voodoo came from them. So big shout out to Brownells and Downrange Thermal. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about it. So when I was with James Ferguson at XMTG, he trains a lot of civilians as well as military and law enforcement. And we talked about how overlooked the 5.56, gas gun is. In this case, it's a short stroke gas piston system with the HK MR 5.56. And we'll talk about that in a second, why I've kind of converted this into my SPR. And we'll talk about the setup at the end as well. But most Americans, again, who are into the gun world, they're into the gun community. It's like, okay, I have this gun for this purpose and this gun for that purpose, and that's great. But the majority of Americans have one AR-15, and it's typically a 16-inch gun. So 16-inch guns are massively overlooked for their capability, especially in long range. So with a somewhat cheap, inexpensive ammunition, factory ammunition being AAC 77 grain OTMs, I was able to stretch this. This is a 16 and a half inch, technically, HK, out to 700 yards pretty easily and very consistently. Obviously, glass is going to play a factor in that. Are you running a bipod on it? Are you braced? What positions are you shooting in? Obviously, I'm not shooting off of like a barrel out to 700 yards with this rifle. At least I'm not. I'm not even going to attempt that. But shooting it out to 700 yards, proned out, properly braced, 100% doable. And I think a lot of people, they always go through these scenarios in their head, like this doomsday scenario, like when we're going to need to use our rifles to defend from China or Russia or whatever. Not even considering scenarios, you should just train and stretch your weapon and yourself to the max capabilities that it can reach. And honestly, nobody knows what the future holds. So why not know the outer limits of your capabilities as well as your weapon platform? And that's what I like to do with my guns. I mean, long range shooting is probably the most rewarding type of shooting for me, besides like up close and fast pistol shooting. That's also very fun. But the long range stuff has a special place in my heart because it is very difficult. And it's very rewarding when you put something together like this rifle, or you've practiced enough, you've known your dope, and you've shot enough to figure out, okay, I can run from 100 to 700 yards without having to look at my dope on a sheet or on a even a piece of paper, a flip-up cap, and be able to get consistent hits first round out to those distances. So I think it's important. I mean, the only downside to this and the only thing that's hindering, I think, most Americans is they just don't have a place where they can go out and train out to many further distances past probably 100 or 200 yards. That's the biggest thing. And even myself being here in Central Texas, I live outside of Austin, but I have to drive about an hour and 20 minutes to RPR. So big shout out to RPR. Love those folks over there, but I still have to drive, and it's kind of a event. I can't just pop by on my way home, or it's not like a really quick thing. I got to pack a lunch, I got to pack, water, hydration, and then go out there and pray to God nothing goes wrong with my rifle, because I don't feel like it's a day ruined. So, but yeah, I have to drive pretty far, even being in Texas and how pro gun Texas is. That's one of the best ranges in Texas, and believe me, I've looked far and wide. There's really ETTS outside of Dallas. There's James Ferguson's place, which isn't open to the public; it's for his training purposes. And then there's RPR, and I know there's a few other places like outside of Houston I'm not too familiar with, but I think those are membership only, so on and so forth. So even in Texas, I've struggled with finding cool ranges that are very laid back and you have the ability to actually train past the distance of 100 or 200 yards that most ranges have. Even indoor ranges that have 100-yard bays, it's like those are good for sighting, so you don't have to run back and forth to zero your rifle. But again, I think the biggest issue is most Americans just don't have a place that can go train for these distances. So I think it is worth the investment if you are someone who wants to take your shooting to the next level and take it seriously, to really explore and really do a deep dive. And if you have to drive 2 hours, so be it. Maybe drive 2 hours once a month or once every other month, or just do whatever you can now. And eventually, it'll be more worth it, and you'll get into it more, and it'll be more exciting. But yeah, all the hype about SBRs and even 11.5s are able to reach out to 500 yards. I've taken my Mark 18, my 10.3 out to 500 yards on multiple occasions. Now, is it going to be as consistent? Is there going to be as much energy on target as you would with a 16-inch gun? No, but 16-inch guns, again, they get a bad rap for being too long. They're kind of like, people look at them in the gun community as like being this no man's land where they're not good at long range, they're not good for CQB, they're kind of worthless. And it's like, no, if you train with them, like the Orion Training Group guys show you how to break down your rifle in CQB situations over the shoulder, you can really pretty easily maneuver a 16-inch gun. I mean, of course, not as easy as a 11.5 or a 10.3 even, but you can start to maneuver a 16-inch gun within a structure. Obviously, again, not as easy as some of those smaller rifles, but it can be done. And you can also stretch these things out to the 700-800 yard marker with the right ammunition, with the right setup and the right technique. They can absolutely do it. So I just wanted to shed some light on this because, again, it's like the non-sexy barrel length. It's like the jack of all trades, master of none. But I do think that there is a very firm place in your collection. And obviously, if you had in a perfect world, like what I say, range day, bro, like, would you just recommend having just a 16-inch gun? It's like, no. Would I recommend you just have an impact gun, or just a pipe wrench? Like, no. These are tools, so have the proper tool for the job is very important. So in an ideal world, it's like you got a reliable sidearm, Glock, whatever it is, whatever your choice is. Then you might have an SBR lower, so you can run an 11.5 URGI, for instance, on that lower, and then also have an 18-inch or a 16-inch upper on there. That'd be more of like I'd have a gun for 0 to 300 yards with that SBR, and then a gun from 300 out to 600 or 700 with that 18 or 16-inch 5.56 gun, and then that's kind of the best of all worlds. Then maybe like a Magnum caliber bolt gun for large game or shooting super far, super extreme long range, out past from 700 out to a mile, right? 300 Win Mag, something like that. So that's a perfect world. But again, we don't live in a perfect world. Most people own 16-inch guns. And so, yeah, just go out there and train with them, guys. They're capable of way more than we realize, and we give them credit for. Most gun folks who are seriously like into guns, I feel like, look over this barrel length. And again, for what reason, I'm not 100% sure. So, but with that being said, let's talk about my setup here, because I know guys are going to have questions about it. So let's start from blast end to ass end here. And starting up at the front is my absolute favorite suppressor to this day, especially for 5.56. This is the Otter Creek Labs OCM5. Absolutely phenomenal can. I used to have it on my Mark 12, my modernized Mark 12 build, but this has now become my SPR sort of setup because this gun is super accurate. And it is running, and it is mounted up to, and let's see if I can get this baby off. I put a ton of rounds through this thing with James. So it is running on an over-the-barrel muzzle device. As you can see, it's very dirty. That actually allows you to use this kind of this Ops Inc. style where you have a break and a collar. without having that barrel profile. So let me actually get you guys up close so you can actually see it. Full disclaimer rather, Otter Creek Labs did send me this muzzle device, but I did pay for the suppressor myself long before I ever met Andrew or knew anybody at Otter Creek Labs. So I was a believer in this can long before I met those guys. But this muzzle device, it isn't cheap, but I will say it performed phenomenally well. I've obviously never shot it without the suppressor because once you shoot the suppressor, you never go back. So there's that. But I did just want to be, completely transparent with you guys. I did get this sent to me by Andrew. So, but it wouldn't have changed what I would have said about it. And honestly, I think Otter Creek Labs is the last company you ever need to worry about. Because they are brutally honest with themselves on their own products. So with that being said, let's move on back. We have a Geissele rail. This is the Geissele HK 416 rail. It's the 15-incher right here. We do have, I believe it's a cold hammer forged, but not a chrome lined barrel. I could be wrong on that. There's tons of information out there on the specs on this thing. It's a HK MR556. So you could look that up if you're interested in what the barrel material is. I know it's not chrome lined, but I'm pretty sure it is cold hammer forged. We do have a Magpul bipod. A lot of people will talk shit on Magpul bipods. They're fine. They work. It's nothing fancy like an Atlas. I like that you can quickly deploy them. And in fact, James has some paracord tied around the bottom of this so he can quickly deploy it. He said he got that idea from somewhere else, so he wasn't trying to steal credit for that. But I thought it was really cool. You can quickly deploy these without having to, with one hand rather. It is running on an American Defense Manufacturing QD. Because I bought the M-LOK Magpul bipod, and then I decided I want to be able to move this around from gun to gun without having to buy a bipod for every gun. So I just bought that QD, although it is very expensive. It's about the price of another bipod. It's about $100 for that American Defense M-LOK to QD adapter. I still like it. So yeah, there's that. I am running the Samson Manufacturing vertical foregrip. It's their shorty. I love this thing because if I'm gonna run it, if I'm gonna be shooting off of a barricade or something, and I want to put a bag underneath this in order to get a better, more stability, I can quickly just spin it off without tools, and I can have a more flush surface on the bottom to run that bag with. I have a pick rail back here in the back. That's just for my tripod, so I don't have to buy a bunch of Arca Swiss mounts because those get very expensive. So there's that. And then moving back from there, the glass is a big part of what allows you to reach out the distance with a gun like this. So this is nothing crazy. It's got a 10x top end. It's the EOTech Voodoo 1-10. Great glass, I believe Japanese glass. It's got locking turrets. It's got a capped windage turret and a locking elevation turret. It's illuminated, and this has a pretty good BDC reticle, which makes for a very fun time shooting quickly and changing distances when you're shooting. So I really love this thing. You'll see this thing in action in that video with James and XMTG on that scope carbine course that we did. I'll be editing that soon. So I did miss the Cloud Defensive Rain 3.0 up front. This is their older style switch. Still works fine. It's nothing crazy. I did kind of cringe spending $400 on a light, but that is what it is. It is on their like SBR extended mount here, so get a little bit less suppressor shadow or muzzle shadow, whatever you want to call it, from the can there. But yeah, so extends it out in the front a little bit with the switch. And then moving back from there, stock HK everything, stock trigger. The trigger is something I'd recommend you'd upgrade. So have good glass and a good trigger and a bipod, and you can pretty much shoot a 16-inch gun out to 600, 700 yards pretty easily. But stock BCG trigger selector. I did change out the pistol grip for a HK, more like RAL 8000, like A5 looking 416 trigger rather. Or sorry, pistol grip. And then the trigger guard I also upgraded. Don't even know who makes that, but it's a little bit of extended trigger guard. And then I have a Law Tactical folder on here because it's nice to be able to fold the gun down. Now I will say I love Law Tactical, but this thing has a little bit more play. This thing has a little bit more play than I'd like. Here, there it is. You guys see that? And this is the first Law Tactical I've had that has that kind of play. So I don't know if I installed it wrong or what's going on. Full disclosure, maybe it's non-issue because I've had no issues with it, and I put about 500 rounds through this thing since I put that on, maybe more. Shot a ton with this thing recently. So maybe it's a non-issue. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It hasn't been an issue so far. Got a regular HK charging handle on here. So it's the big oversized latch that it comes with. I am running a Badger Condition 1 mount. These are my favorite mounts today. I do wish they made a QD version, but they don't. But Badger Condition 1, this is on a 1.7 height, which makes it pretty tall because the HK upper receiver sits a little bit taller even than a normal AR-15 upper receiver, as you guys can see right there. So it sits a little bit higher. So it ends up being like a 193, which is not great for prone shooting, for accuracy and for distance. So I'd probably change that out for a 1.5 if I could do it all over again, and then a regular HK stock. So an HK buffer tube and buffer weight and all that, the ones that came with the gun. So, oh, and Blue Force gear, Vickers sling, free Larry Vickers, my boy, and free CRS, and free every freedom-loving American whose only victimless crime was to love guns and love freedom. Shout out to those guys, and I pray for them all the time. So hopefully things get better for you guys. And if you guys can support those guys too, I mean, there's only so much we could do. I really don't know what the answer is, but some out of control agencies out there. So, but with that being said, guys, that pretty much wraps it up. 16-inch guns may not be the sexiest things in the world, but they're highly capable, and you should train with them. And if that's all you got, then you should really know it inside and out. Get some good glass for it. Get a good trigger in your gun. Get a bipod, and then just get down and start shooting it. Get some ammo. So. With that being said, thank you guys so much for staying to the end of the video. If you do want to support the channel, again, RDB10 is 10% off at Brownells. RDB5 is 5% off at Downrange Thermal. And then liking, commenting, subscribing is a huge help as well, guys. Yeah, love your neighbor, love your family, tell them you love them. We never know when our time is up on this earth. So just enjoy every single day and just forgive, guys. It's not worth holding on to that hate in your heart. So I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. Later.